Hey friends, this is Prasenjit C, your friendly neighborhood tech expert and India, US-based YouTuber. Before we dive in, go ahead and click subscribe if you haven't already to keep up with my latest videos on using technology responsibly for the greater good. Today we're tackling a heavyweight topic in the world of AI ethics, the potential for theft and misuse of extremely large machine learning systems like GPT-4. Now, to understand why the security of systems like this matters, we first have to cover some basics. The key thing enabling all these recent leaps in AI is a category of programs called large language models, or LLMs for short. They're trained on absolutely massive sets of text data, like hundreds of billions of words massive, to learn how to understand and generate human language. So under the hood, an LLM consists of two core pieces. First is some code that handles the learning algorithms and stuff. This is important but honestly pretty compact, just hundreds of lines. The second and much bulkier component is called the model parameters, essentially a giant spreadsheet of numbers that captures all the patterns and correlations the system has picked up from its training. For GPT-3, we're talking around 175 billion parameters. For GPT-4, likely over a trillion. On top of the immense datasets required, creating large language models demands truly massive amounts of computing power during training. We're talking server farms packed densely with hundreds if not thousands of specialty AI accelerator chips, mostly state-of-the-art graphics processors from NVIDIA and AMD. All that hardware is expensive to buy at scale but also to continuously power and cool. Renting access on cloud platforms like Amazon Web Services or Oz and Microsoft Azure has become the only viable option for most companies to get off the ground. So not only do these invaluable LLM assets get copied across clusters of machines as mentioned earlier, much of the actual infrastructure running them belongs to third parties too. Does outsourcing so much to the cloud not worsen security though? Well, major cloud hosts invest incredible sums into both physical and cyber protections for their data centers against intrusion and abuse. However, they're still large operations with many employees servicing hardware, chances for things to fall between the cracks. Let's expand on that idea a bit more. While the cloud offers undeniable capability and efficiencies, it also represents a fundamental tension when relying so heavily on external infrastructure to power such sensitive internal products and trade secrets. Ownership gets blurry. Responsibilities can slip through the cracks. Uniquely so with AI systems pushing the bleeding edge of available capacity too. Progress often happens faster than governance can solidify around it. Researchers have proven concepts for stealthily extracting small chunks of data from systems under load, hiding it inside outwardly normal image files, for example, that could slide past alarms. But funneling out something on the multi-gigabyte or even terabyte scale of the full models through such covert external means seems improbable currently. That said, new techniques tailored to circumventing AI systems specifically could shift the equation over time as knowledge disseminates through the hacker community. I'll plan future videos diving deeper into emerging attack vectors leveraging machine learning itself. In my opinion, however, the most realistic path forward for adversaries is somehow gaining direct hands-on access to model data while actively running on rented cloud hardware. What's known as data in use as opposed to data at rest or data in transit. And this speaks to a fundamental tension that arises when you start relying heavily on external infrastructure to enable and safeguard internal products and trade secrets. See, there's an entire specialty within cybersecurity focusing on these types of so-called side-channel or physical attacks. Stealthily stealing protected info by physically monitoring target hardware behavior during processing. Things like measuring electromagnetic emissions or power consumption to deduce secrets. Research literature covers a few context-specific techniques adversaries could leverage. Memory bus monitoring essentially taps into the main data channel of the GPU to capture information flowing between components during processing. Memory probes are a more blatant tactic, attempts to directly scan and read out sensitive data lingering unencrypted in system RAM after a job finishes. In the past, conceptually pulling off this kind of attack seemed unlikely enough that providers didn't focus much effort on defending against them specifically. When you physically control access to your on-premises servers, it felt reasonable to assume that also meant full control and security of their contents too. Data centers staffed by your own people under strict policies. But as touched on earlier, the now widespread adoption of cloud computing for economical access to expensive hardware massively expanded the possible attack landscape. Companies now regularly rent racks of remote GPUs to power their systems, data centers owned and operated by external entities. Suddenly, the feasibility threshold of techniques like memory snooping and CPU cache side channels starts looking rather more realistic to well-resourced adversaries. There are some hardware and software steps that can help guard models during processing, but often with big performance impacts that degrade the very AI capabilities companies are trying to responsibly build products and services on top of. For example, fully encrypting a GPU's onboard memory can definitively block unauthorized access attempts. However, latency suffers significantly as data gets decrypted and re-encrypted with every operation, up to 50% slower in benchmarks. That kind of performance hit just won't fly for user-facing services already considered slow today like ChatGPT, especially as people's tolerance for laggy software decreases over time too. So in practice, there are lots of tensions trying to balance airtight security with the smooth experience needed for consumers. Trade-offs abound. However, an emerging technology coalition formed back in 2019 could hold promise here. I'm talking about Confidential Computing, an alliance for new hardware security capabilities spearheaded by a joint effort between Microsoft, Google Cloud, some cutting-edge startup hardware makers, and others. The core concept they're pioneering is establishing what's known as a Trusted Execution Environment, or T, at the processor level. A secure, tamper-resistant sanctuary for code and data enabled by built-in security features already present on modern CPUs and GPUs. The key goals are twofold. First, provide that hardware-based secure enclave to isolate sensitive workloads from the rest of the system, even from high-privilege operating system code that otherwise has free reign. Kind of like Apple's secure enclave that underpins stringent on-device privacy measures like facial recognition inside iPhones. Second, allow remote auditing to cryptographically verify what software is actually running inside that T before ingesting any sensitive data. This prevents situations where attackers load doctored malware pretending to be legitimate apps. Newer GPU server architectures like NVIDIA's flagship H100 data center chip now natively incorporate support for confidential computing concepts within specialized on-die hardware, tightly coupled to fast encryption engines. And remarkably, benchmarks exhibit virtually no performance penalty for AI workloads running fully protected on these T-enabled GPUs versus unsecured setups. We seem to be crossing into an era where robust security and lightning speed need not be mutually exclusive, even operating on immense models requiring intense computations. Exciting stuff. With all that background covered, let's circle back once more to the implications of potential LLM data theft. What exactly could the unchecked release of something like a stolen GPT-4 model out into the public internet realistically enable in terms of harm? I see a few likely consequences. First, openly available giant language models would further empower new waves of highly convincing phishing campaigns, email scams, disinformation operations, and more. The most advanced generators today already readily produce deceptively human-like text around arbitrary topics on demand. Yet more capability getting into the hands of malicious actors promises to make the situation steadily worse. Second, easily accessible LLMs would enable new scales of automated abusive chatbots, from subtly harassing individuals to overtly deluging people with vile slander. Not to mention sophisticated bots impersonating real users for fraud. Basically all the risks people worry about with AI conversation tools, but accelerated. Third, leaked models trained using copyrighted source material data could kick off thorny legal battles, especially if they clearly incorporated pirated works. Things get murky quickly trying to litigate AI training processes. On the flip side, LLM leaks could potentially force some positive changes too. Back in 2021, an unplanned public release of the smaller Anthropic LLM called Claude sparked something of an open-source movement. Multiple other concerned research groups racing similar models chose to release their own architectures transparently too, arguing that pushing progress ethically out in the open better serves society long-term versus staying silent. So while unauthorized LLM data circulation enabling nasty outcomes seems likely short-term, the aftershocks may also serve as catalysts driving crucial ethical dialogues around development best practices, along with security awareness across both the private sector and governments. Which actually hints at something I want to touch on as we approach wrapping up, the human element enabling data breaches. Up to now, we've centered discussion mostly on hypothetical external technical attacks to bypass systems and steal protected data assets. But malicious insiders are equally real risks to factor in. There's troubling historical precedent of state-sponsored groups cultivating insider access to extract sensitive information from big tech companies, even here in the US. Just look at the explosive findings around Twitter's data and national security vulnerabilities back in late 2021. You had an Arab state intelligence operative successfully recruiting 2 Twitter engineers to hand over certain users' personal account data and posts. Rather than through overt threats or extortion even, the employees stated they believed they were simply helping an ally government conduct official investigations. Alarming. It's hardly unimaginable that rival countries have fingers in companies across Silicon Valley to enable similar infiltration schemes to get at prized AI research. Both models and rare insider knowledge would prove hugely useful jumpstarting their own competing programs. Not to mention malicious lone insiders just acting for personal profit, ideology, or secondary motives. Tech firms are far from immune there either. Amazon Oz faced an ugly data theft prosecution in 2022 by an engineer stealing customer resource usage metrics trying to sell them on the black market. He's now serving prison time. So while remote cyber intrusions probably pose the most active threat day to day, leadership still desperately needs to enable ethical workplace cultures and lean security policies to help guard against human-enabled disasters too. Employees are absolutely make or break links as well. Alright, bringing us close to the finish line. I'll wrap up with some final bigger picture thoughts. While revolutionary AI systems don't necessarily revolutionize the nature of digital threats themselves, their unprecedented appetite for data paired with intense computational demands absolutely acts as threat multiplier when it comes to potential harm. Attackers are already rapidly skill up to leverage machine learning for their own ends, often faster than defensive measures and policies can react. So while no organization can make themselves utterly breach-proof in an age of cloud fluidity and global state-level threats, maintaining good practices both organizationally and individually does meaningfully push the odds back in favor of the good guys. As large language models continue permeating into the digital fabric worldwide, both beneficial applications but also attacks seeking to extract, replicate, or misuse them likely scale up too, in frequency, variety, and overall impact. However, even as malicious activity around emerging technologies appears inevitable to some degree, actively minimizing needless harm remains very possible through sustained education, ethics awareness, security readiness, and responsible governance. Progress demands sober understanding of risks balanced with idealistic dedication to realizing long-term positive potential. Both creators and consumers play roles here as AI quickly moves mainstream over the coming decade. As always, friends, those are just my current thoughts as one guy excited yet cautious for the future. Let me know your own perspectives or any lingering questions in the comments. I always appreciate healthy discussion. And don't forget to smash that subscribe button if you dig this kind of level-headed tech analysis. Plenty more to come soon and I don't want you to miss it. Thanks again so much for spending some time watching, and I'll catch you in the next video. Be well.